Hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're located. This is Bill Mork with Quorum. I appreciate those of you that are ready to rock and have already signed in. Just give another minute or so before we kick off the presentation here. Typical format is as usual. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. If as and when you have questions, please feel free to chat them. I'll be the moderator, so when it's appropriate, I'll deliver them to our presenters today and get those answered. Any questions that we're unable to get to, we'll make sure to follow up an email, but we'll address as many as we can as we go. And looks like most everyone has signed in. I'm sure there'll be some stragglers, but let's go ahead and kick off the presentation by introducing our presenters today. Let me just pull up the slide deck here. So I can share. So again, presentation topic today is covering the National Cybersecurity Strategy that was recently rolled out by the White House. It was a really lengthy document. So part of what we're going to do today is help you guys digest that. What was in there? What does it mean? And how does it impact business and DR strategies moving forward? On the call with me, I have Gabriel Gamble, who is presented on many webinars with me. He's Quorum's VP of Technology and Product, has a lot of experience with disaster recovery, backup implementation, both internal as an IT administrator, also as a managed service provider, and of course now helping our clients. Our guest speaker today is Charles, and he joins us also with a ton of cybersecurity specific experience, which is really exciting for me. He's going to help walk us through the White House strategy, what's there, what's missing, and today he leads many conversations around cybersecurity thought leadership and is even an adjunct professor leading in the same conversation. So thank you, Charles, for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
And again, if you have any questions at all, please just feel free to chat them and I'll give them to our moderators. Charles, if you want to go ahead and start the presentation, I'll click through to the first slide if you want to start going through unpacking this White House strategy for us.
Yeah. So thank you for attending as we talk through the new national strategy for cybersecurity. So interestingly, the Biden administration's been very active in the cybersecurity space with a number of executive orders, increased funding, a lot more emphasis with the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency. So a lot's going on in the cyberspace. It's been a very active activity, and this new national strategy, which was looked forward to for a good amount of time. Chris Ingalls, who was leading up a lot of the cybersecurity for the White House, was a former NSA deputy director, a lot higher than I ever reached. But he recently retired. But it was really, this was his what he wanted to finish and complete before he stepped down. So it's very nice that we're here and talking about that. And what's interesting is this new national strategy is really a re-imaging of what we're going on with cyberspace. We're seeing it. They want it to be a tool, not some type of idea, but a real tool. And the whole aspect of this new national strategy and the top aspects of it is that it's going to shift the roles and resources. So before, it's always like either government did this or a lot of the security is set on the individual. So when they talk about rebalancing responsibility, they want to take the responsibility off the individual or the company, kind of like the victim per se, and move it to organizations, companies, software developers, software companies, people who create the vulnerabilities. So that is where they're trying to move things. And to make that a reality is they're going to realign the incentives for investment. So if you spend more money on doing better software development or fixing your vulnerabilities and things, you're going to get some benefits for that. And I think, the incentives can also play for the consumer, for the user. So that's really why this national strategy is a lot different than some of the others, because of this tools, roles, resources, responsibility, and incentives.
Thanks.
So I think I wanted to say I could do it, but I guess I couldn't. So there's strategic vision. Now, of course, a strategy, especially that comes out of the White House, the executive branch at this level, is very high level. So it's not going to have a lot of details, and we're going to get into some of that material here. But there is a vision beyond what we talked about, and that is one, to strengthen our defenses. Right? We need to create confidence that the critical infrastructures, and interesting, we talked about one of the classes. I just came from my critical infrastructure protection class that I teach. So this is very applicable to me, because cybersecurity and the critical infrastructure are really connected in this space. So we need to use more, expand what is the minimum cybersecurity requirement. So we always talk about the regulations and what you need to do, but we need to kind of like raise that bar on what the minimum is. So we need to improve defenses. So that's part of the strategic resilience. So resilience is really being able to anticipate, withstand an attack. We've done that in many things, but recover from and adapt to the conditions, the stresses, the attacks, or the compromises. So I think that the whole discussion, and we see this in critical infrastructure, but also in cybersecurity, the resilience is becoming a much more important aspect of our ability. And as we're going to get into, being able to withstand and recover from is very important to the strategic vision, but we're going to see that we need to have much more detail in that, and that's what we're going to talk about with the rest of quorum here. I just threw in here the continuity. This reinforces the existing regulations and executive orders that have been coming through in the last few years. Executive Order 14028, improving nation cybersecurity came in there, and they're moving the government towards a zero trust cybersecurity principle, and so very important in that. So let's look at what is next on the aspects of the strategy, and it's built on 5 pillars. So it's built on 5 pillars that interact with the critical infrastructure, as you mentioned. Private sector is definitely a part of this, and the government sector. So we have defend the critical infrastructure, and that is our communications, our computers, our water systems, our banking systems, energy, all of those activities. So that's the first part, is we need to defend all of that. But pretty much critical infrastructure is nearly everything we use every day. We need to degrade the threat actors. We need to make their job harder and be able to keep them from doing what they need to do. The strategy is to drive market forces. So this has to be a market-driven solution. It can't be top-down. So they're trying to make it so it's more of a bottom-up, which we've always tried to talk about as an analyst. We always talked about build it in. And this is where some of that strategy is, to drive that market forces, make the software better. Invest in the future, need to invest always. And then pursue shared goals. So in this strategy, it's not just our goals with the US, but it's internationally also, because cybersecurity doesn't care about borders, or I should say that attackers don't care about borders. So you need to deal with it across international lines. So the shared goals are shared goals, not just here in the US, not just between the private sector and the government sector, but between international. So those are the top 5 pillars. All right. So I'm still not clicking here. That's all right. What's interesting, and we did talk about this, and I went through the whole strategy, and again, it's top level. There's only one specific element that talks about data and data protection. So the top data security element is a whole strategic element, 3.1, that is to hold the stewards, the owners of your data accountable. Right? So you need to be able to be sure that the persons that are collecting data, that are using data, that are holding data, are meeting security needs. So we need to deal with the ransomware threat, which is the greatest issue. And ransomware has become so much more now than just encrypting data and making it unavailable. Now they steal it too, and then they extort you. So it becomes much more of a data loss and data issue than just before, when it was a data loss as opposed to a data exposure. We need to promote privacy and security in personal data. That's always been our efforts, is to make privacy, and we see that with millions upon millions of records stolen every year with our personal data. How many times? I think I saw a data point once that said like 6. Now each person has had like 6 events, or their personal data has been stolen probably 6 times, which I don't doubt that's true. I'm not sure the exact number, but it is, when we lose our data, we haven't lost it just once, we've lost it a lot. And the last part of this data accountability, of course, is rebalance that responsibility again. Before, it was always on the person who lost the data. They have to go and make sure that they are not being having their personal data stolen and their personality stolen, credit cards coming out there. So we need to rebalance that responsibility and give some responsibility back to the person that is holding that data, and make them accountable, so that they have the incentive, be a negative incentive or positive incentive, to ensure that that data that they are holding, that they are the stewards for, is going to be safe. So this is the quote from there: "We must hold the stewards of our data accountable for the protection of personal data and reshape laws that govern liability for data loss." So again, there's not a lot of liability for data loss. The most we have right now is breaches. But interestingly, and we're going to get into this, they talk about the loss of the data, but we're not talking about the protection or the recovery of data, or the continuation of operations that may result in a ransomware threat. So we can go to the next slide. And that's where we're talking about what is missing. There is no specific discussion on the security data repositories, where they are, whose responsibility, how cloud and distributed computing impact the security and resilience. And specifically, this is where I was really disappointed when I went through and read the document, was that they don't specifically call out disaster recovery. So resilience is being able to recover from an event. So why isn't disaster recovery in there for some type of mentioned once? I was a little disappointed with that. And so you really have to go through and move forward with that activity. So this is a quote that is just in general when we talk about resilience, and that is the risk management process includes comprehensive recovery planning. So that was probably the closest that came in there, but I believe, and I'd have to look at my notes on this specifically, but this really was from a different document and not so much the security planning, but the whole issue is that resilience needs to have this comprehensive recovery planning. And that's where quorum comes in, and what we find was missing, and need to have a good look at what's going forward with this strategy, and how we can build on this. So what we're going to talk about is building on to the strategy of including data recovery and disaster recovery as much as the prevention side. So that needs to be part of that. So the resilience as opposed to the security. All right.
Agreed. So this is
Gabe,
a slide I added in, Charles.
You taking over, Gabe?
Yeah, so I added in this slide after I read through the document. I found it interesting that, you know, such broad topics like disaster recovery weren't mentioned, but the White House made a specific point to say that when you're dealing with ransomware, and they went from espionage to ransomware, but when you're dealing with that, they pointed out that there are, it's mostly run by criminal organizations operating outside of the US in locations that encourage, harbor, and tolerate such activities. And they made a point of pointing out, you know, Russia and China, North Korea and Iran in this thing. And I found that interesting that they made such a broad sweep with this discussion, but didn't focus on, you know, ways to combat this other than what they're doing on a global scale. So I found that interesting that, you know, it really is a broad reaching strategy, and it is up at the strategy level. A lot of it hasn't been put into actual action yet. But there are a few things that they have done. So if you can hop to the next slide, one of the things that they've done, and I think they've done this actually really well, whoops, went too far, there you go, is they've made this a call to one as a call to all when you're dealing with ransomware. So whether you're calling the local police department or the FBI, you're hitting the CISA website, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure website, which is an amazing resource if you're hit with ransomware. They inform all of the other things, and then they use that group effort to go after the threat actors, to go after the you know, if they're starting to build a library of unencryption algorithms to get data back for people. They're going after the money, they're following the money trail, where we never saw that in the early days of this. You were kind of on your own, and they were recording stuff, but they weren't taking a lot of action. And over the last few years, I've really seen that change to where I see most people, and I'm assuming like yourself, that say, if you're hit with ransomware and you don't have a recovery strategy, your first call needs to be the FBI. Because that they are really taking a proactive role that I've never seen in a group setting like this, to combat this. And it's not just nationally, but it is an international effort that I've seen. They're doing a lot of work with the UK and Australia on this. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out, that came out of this as well, because it is definitely a shift from, you know, even 2 years ago from what I was seeing when customers were hit with ransomware, or pre-customers, you know, that were coming to us hit with ransomware and couldn't recover. So
yeah, that's part of the whole push to make this a national strategy, as you say, to bring all of these resources to bear. And before they weren't. I mean, talking about, you know, just a few years ago, but years and years ago, there's whole stories about guys making calls to all of these different agencies, and none of them would even take responsibility for helping. And
right.
now you call one, and you're going to be able to get that disseminated across all of these areas to give you some assistance.
Yeah, it is one of the things. I mean, I've read a couple of articles where people have run through this, and it is definitely a central focus that I've seen now, that the FBI and the CISA organization really take ownership of that, and everyone feeds into that, so that they have a consistent recovery strategy that helps, you know, a multitude of people. So,
yep.
All right, if we'll pop into the next slide, I'll kind of hop into how Quorum has been addressing this and how we continue to address this for customers. So whether you are a company and you're replicating your data offsite to a cloud, or whether you have multiple sites replicating to a main site or multiple sites replicating to a cloud, any way you're set up, Quorum is designed from the ground up to be a recovery strategy, specifically a secure recovery strategy for these kind of situations. So if you'll hop to the next slide here. The first thing that we attacked when we did this is ease of use. And what we did is we made it a one-click restore capability. So all you got to do is power on your recovered server and bring it up, whether that's locally or if you have an appliance remotely or from the cloud. It's a one-click recovery strategy to get that server back up and running to a point in time before you had ransomware or before you had any kind of cyber event or data loss disaster. We made it easy to find, click, and do. It doesn't require a special certification or training to go through to get to that point. And we encapsulated everything in a single pane of glass so that when you're going through a recovery strategy, you know, I remember the days when I worked for an MSP at doing community banks around the US, and recovery strategies were a 500-page binder that you've set and followed all the different pages when you had to do a recovery, because there was so many steps to get back up and running. And now it's you know, click, 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 and we go, and very few decisions have to be made. They're important decisions and they still need to be made, but very few decisions have to be made in order to get your recovery back up. Next slide.
Which means the recoveries are fast too, right, Gabe?
Right. And then that's the whole goal. You know, that whole adage of time is money is really applies here, right? You got to get back up and running, because if you're a bank and you can't process, you know, people's paychecks or whatever, it has a cascade effect for sure. From the beginning, so Quorum, the policy engine that runs Quorum and everything Quorum was designed on, was actually designed for a US naval application, so that it could make decisions before a person could make them. And although the US Navy never bought the application, the process that we've used to create it was from the ground up made to be secure. And so Quorum Labs has a private cloud where we have an East and West Coast data center that we keep HIPAA and PCI compliant and certified, so that your data held in there is encrypted, it's safe, and it's secure. We follow all the latest policies and guidelines for that.
So just as an aside, you're living the national strategy.
We are ahead of the curve. Exactly right.
And taking responsibility for the data and those materials, right? So you're
absolutely
as much as a user or a practitioner of the national strategy as you are discussing it.
For sure. I mean, you know, from the ground up, we were like, okay, you know, all of our backups have always been immutable, which means once it's written to the disk, you can't change it again. So even if our appliance got infected with ransomware, it can infect the backups. It doesn't have a means to do that. It's logically air gapped. So when you're not running a recovered server, it's not accessible from the network. You don't even see it. We have 24/7 technical support. Most came.
So just an aside for the persons that may not be aware, when you talk about that logical air gap solution and not being able to see it, that one of the big problems, one of the issues ransomware had was that they found a way to attack your backups.
Yes.
Correct. So
yeah,
with this situation, they're not getting into your backup.
Absolutely. In fact, it's very interesting. We had a customer that was attacked by ransomware in February, I think, and we see that they actually hit the servers in January and started doing scans. And we can see in our web logs, they're doing penetration scans trying to get in. Obviously, they didn't get in, and we were able to bring those servers up and recover them after the fact. But that whole mentality of they're on a month, 2 months ahead of time looking for ways to get into your backups. That adage is absolutely true, Charles. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Most of our technical support guys either came from the backup industry or from the managed service industry working with community banks. So everything we've done has been in that mindset of BCP and recovery. Everything we do is basically built on that kind of mentality.
Yeah. Just a
Next slide.
little note here. A lot of Quorum's initial customers were like Canadian Navy, healthcare,
Correct.
banks, financial, legal, and for a few years, Quorum was kind of a niche player because it was so highly secured that I'm talking like 2009, 2010, the general market said we don't really need that. And now, all of these things that Quorum has built in is really sought
all
after.
catching up.
Yes,
It's
sir.
funny you mention that, because I've seen that as an analyst too. The guys that were really secure at one point, everyone thought that, yeah, you're too secure for us.
Yeah.
But with ransomware kind of changed that concept, that idea, I believe.
For sure. In the early days, it was definitely Quorum. You guys are overkill. That's a lot. And I'm like, it's the right thing to do, guys, and you guys should all be looking at it.
Yep.
For sure. Okay. Completeness of our solution, and like I've said before, from the ground up, it is a full recovery application. It's designed to bring your systems back up with the same software, the same IPs, the same everything, so that you can get back up and running in the time it takes to boot. Everything we built is designed to not rely. So they use the term now zero trust. We used to call it system agnostic. And in fact, my slide still does, but it's a zero trust policy. We don't trust your domain. We don't trust your DNS. We don't trust anything in your environment. Once we have the data on our machine, that's it. We assume that when you need us, everything else is gone. So we don't want to trust anything. So we don't have, single sign-on or any of those things. We do have multi-factor authentication because you want that for security, but we don't want to rely on anything in your network because that is a way into our system. So we assume that we don't want to be reliant on your hypervisor or your storage platform or anything. So we're an appliance-based solution that's really made to be agnostic to your environment so that when you need to recover, we're not affected by whatever might have affected you. From the ground up, everything we've done is designed to be replicated offsite, either to another appliance or to the Quorum cloud. So you have a true disaster recovery scenario with the 3-2-1 idea of 3 copies of your data, production, local, and remote, 2 different types of storage mediums, whether you're in the cloud or on an appliance, and 1 way to recover. So that 3-2-1 paradigm really plays out in everything we do, and it's a true disaster recovery solution. And then our recovery, we just added a new feature called VIP that actually allows us to directly back up VMware VMDK servers and recover them onto our appliance, which is not VMware, and as well as recover them back to VMware. So we give you some now flexibility in that recovery paradigm to make that easier for you, but still keep that separation between your network and what the Quorum abilities are, so that you still have that recovery capability if there's a disaster. Sorry, I lost my light.
That's okay. I was just going to add that a lot of clients continue to move applications into the cloud, like Office 365, G Suite, Azure, AWS, and so Quorum can cover on-prem and those cloud hosted applications as well.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. Anything that you're running from the cloud, even if you're running servers in Azure or in AWS and they're your own managed servers, we can actually back those up directly from those locations, because you still want that separation. If Amazon goes down, if Azure goes down, which they have had incidents of happening in the last several years, we want you to be able to recover and keep your business running. So we pull the data out of those environments and make recovery from our cloud or even back to your site on an appliance a possibility and a capability. So a little about how we're kind of designed. And I just wanted to go through this slide really quick because I know we're starting to run out of time and I want to give an opportunity for questions. But if you take the left over here and that's your production environment, whether you're running on VMware, physical servers or whatever, we would back that data up to the Quorum appliance, and then we would give you the ability to recover either directly back to VMware, either a different host or the same, or boot those machines directly from the Quorum appliance, which has all the horsepower you would need to run that set of servers if you had a disaster. So that's the basic way that VIP recovery is designed, and it gives you that option to recover either directly back to your hosts or to the Quorum appliance if you don't have host capabilities. So that's a lot of flexibility in our recovery solution. Still with a single click, you can bring up either of those options. So really easy way to recover in all kinds of environments and all kinds of setups. And that's it. So those are all the main topics we wanted to cover. If you had any questions or any discussions, Charles is a wealth of information, and I'll kind of apply anything I have that might help.
So the only thing I want to add for conclusion, to a certain extent, to tie it back to this national strategy after the great quorum issue, is that, you know, cybersecurity, and I'm going to add disaster recovery and backup as that, you know, as an element of that, is a tool, and you've got a tool here to make this disaster recovery work. I think the whole issue of roles and responsibilities fall into this, but mostly, you know, rebalancing responsibility of that data protection is
Right.
really on these organizations now, and they can have a much better view and much better control with that PCI and HIPAA and all those other aspects to
Agreed.
their disaster recovery and their backup. And the last part is realign the investments, the incentive. The incentive here is having your data when and if you get hit by ransomware. And I really like that area where, you know, you live that zero trust of not relying on that system, and that's why you have that there. So I think you know, the pieces of the national strategy, the high level, you're implementing a lot of what's needed at that
Correct.
macro level, right? So the macro level is the strategy, and your micro level is things that you're doing. And I think those really fit well with the whole goals of the national strategy of ensuring defense and resilience.
I agree. You know, for a long time, the recovery policy of a company was considered an insurance policy, and it was treated as such, right? I want the cheapest solution for my car insurance. It's kind of same mentality, but now it's really a tool. It's changed that focus from being that insurance policy to it's just what you do. It's a responsibility now versus I want the cheap and cheerful. I want what's going to get me back up and running. And that shift has really happened over the last couple of years.
Yeah. No, it's very, very good. So do we have any?
Yeah, we got two
questions?
questions. We got two questions if we have time for them. I know we're a little over time, but one question was, will there be a FedRAMP option in the future for Quorum?
That's a great question. We're working on probably state ramp before FedRAMP, but we're working on both. And really the escalation to get there, the hard part that we're having with getting the approval for FedRAMP is the cost of the audit. And we just don't have enough influx of requests for it to offset that cost right now. And so as we're getting more demand for it, it's definitely on our radar and something we're looking at, but we'll probably do state ramp first because the cost to do the state ramp audit, while very, very similar to the FedRAMP, is still less. And we have more demand from state and city entities than we are from federal government entities right now.
So what I was kind of hearing was that it's about having the audit done. It's kind of seems like the pieces for security are there to meet it. It's just that we haven't.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. Another question was, how scalable is Quorum as a solution?
That's a great question. We're highly scalable, down to our small little OnCube appliance, which is the cute little box you can set on your desk, that can take, 1 to I think 5 servers, all the way up to we have pod infrastructures that can mimic our cloud that can do petabytes of data. So everywhere in between can be covered with a Quorum solution.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate Gabriel and Charles, you leading us through this document. It was definitely a lot of information as I try to get through it. So I appreciated you helping us digest it. Also, I found in the document that it actually referenced quite a few other statements. Would you say that's true? And that there's other resources referenced inside the strategy guide that might give more direction or actionable.
Absolutely. A lot of the strategy guide really pointed us towards other departments that are working on aspects of it. And that's why I referenced the CISA one, because that one was a great resource for me. I spent a long time on their site combing through the different things they're doing and plans that they have. So absolutely, that's one of the things I saw for sure.
Yeah, that's totally true, because they did have the zero trust aspect of the executive orders, ransomware protections, and a number of the activities that are being run by CISA or within the NIST and guidelines and ways to help you move forward to make this strategy real. So that's where they put in a lot of references to help people.
Yeah, at one point I was going over to the EPA site because that was one of the references they had, and I'm like, what are they doing for this? So it was really all over the place.
Yeah.
And this is a question I might be able to take. Somebody asked, does Quorum protect any telecom clients? I believe that there is at least one telecommunications client, but for sure in that neck of the world, neck of the business, like utility providers, electricity, water. I'm trying to think of a specific telecommunications customer that we have. Gabriel, can you add any more to that?
I'm horrible at remembering names off of my head, but yeah, we do have a couple of telecommunications companies that work with us. We also have quite a few power companies that work with us that have, you know, somewhat similar systems. Telecommunications is a little different. It's a little more OT than what we're seeing, but for their IT parts, so operational technology versus information technology, for their IT parts, we're ideally suited. For their OT, it's a little bit of a different beast sometimes, but we're happy to have a discussion and find out more about the environment and see if we'd be a good fit.
Yeah, but any client, I would say, with a really low tolerance on data loss and downtime could potentially be a good fit for Quorum.
I'll give you a good example. Is we have one of the software makers that makes the 911 software, and they're actually bundling our product now with their software. So when they implement it for a city government, they're giving this as a solution for recovery in those kind of scenarios where if, you know, 911 goes down, all hell breaks loose, right? So this is a recovery strategy for that software in those environments.
Good to see you supporting that critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Can Quorum back up Azure file shares?
That's a great question. As of today, we cannot. We can back it up if it's part of OneDrive, or we can back it up if it's a server. But the new Azure file shares is not released as a part of our product yet.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but I do appreciate the questions. I have them documented down, and I'm going to follow up with each one of you after the webinar. So if you had a question that didn't get answered, or you think of one that you didn't ask, we can connect there. If you're interested in learning more about Quorum or unpacking the White House cybersecurity strategy, just let us know. Thanks again for.
If you're looking for something that'll help you fall asleep, that cybersecurity strategy, the long version, it's a dry document. So you got to make sure you have your coffee with you that day.
No doubt.
For sure.
Thanks everybody for joining. It was great.
Thanks, Charles. Really appreciate having you.
Cheers. Thanks everybody.
All right. Take care.
Bye.